All right. I think, to kind of summarize what we're talking about, it's hard to get away from COVID at this point, but the COVID focus is changing. Your messaging should change with it. It's okay to inject non-COVID messaging into what you're doing. As a matter of fact, it sounds like Shannon and I are on the same page that that should be your strategy, is start to blend the two things in. All right, so today we are going to talk about COVID messaging, and in particular messaging on social media and in your marketing. And I'm sure a lot of people are seeing a lot of COVID and coronavirus messaging these days. It's frankly just impossible to get away from it. And what we were talking about at the shop at Array was, is this going to go on forever? How long should we expect this to go on for? And really, what's even the right mix of COVID messaging versus just good old-fashioned business messaging? Can we stop talking about COVID at this point? Do we really need to continue to talk about it? And when's that transition going to happen? So Shannon is our social media specialist. She's the one that runs a ton of social media campaigns for us. And so we thought it'd be good for the two of us to talk about the pros and cons of different strategies when it comes to messaging on social media for COVID, coronavirus, and then a life after that. And how do we transition? So Shannon, how sick of COVID are you these days?
I mainly try to avoid it at most cost. I'll check the news and stuff and just see what's going on, but just kind of getting it on my stream. It's getting a little bit repetitive, and there's no really new information. I did kind of want to talk about some of the cliches, because obviously it's like impossible to not talk about it in a lot of ways, but some of the things that I've been seeing that I've like really been grinding my gears are like literally every post is like uncertain times, and it's like, I wish I had a penny for like every time I've seen like uncertain times. So think about that term and just think about how you can kind of refresh that, because that is like very overused. And I've used it as well, but the last, few weeks, I'm like, okay, I got to stop using that in post because it's everywhere. And also like the really feel goody, like I talked about this with Sean on the last live stream a little bit, but the Walmart commercial where they're all singing, I'm like, this is just not even realistic. And like, what is this doing? So those are the two like major cliches, like rethink your language and like think about saying this, the same thing, but in a different way. And then just watch out for like it's good to be positive, but don't be like overly positive. Like we know like the Walmart stock guy isn't singing somebody to lean on while he's like, restocking. Like it's just.
Now, if he was, I would be singing right next to him. I love
Yeah.
my Walmart, and I love my Walmart workers. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So unprecedented. That's another term. Okay. I get it. I get it. And what's interesting actually is I really don't even think that it's unprecedented. It's unprecedented for us, but there's certainly a precedent for what we're going through from 100 years ago with the Spanish flu.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's, we keep seeing the same messaging, and I keep getting these emails like everyone else is that go into, like, they explain the situation that we're in, how we're in unprecedented times, and how it's really affected business and how it's really affected people. And you have to get through like 3 or 4 paragraphs of this explanation of where we're at before you get to the meat of the email that they sent you. And for me, I think that's a mistake, because the moment that I pick up on that, I'm skipping the paragraph. And I'm just going to keep skipping until I see that they've gotten through their intro that I've already read 100 times. So like one actionable thing I would say that anyone who's watching can do, and by the way, if you have a question, post it in our Facebook Live and we'll answer it before we end. But one thing that I would recommend is just get right to the chase. Like, nobody has time to read all that intro.
And it's just not necessary. Like we're all living in the same reality. And it's also, it's a message that we've seen, as you said, from like a bunch of different I mean, and I mentioned it before too, just like I'm getting the most random emails from like companies I didn't even know had my email address. It's like, I don't care what Universal Studios COVID policy is. I went there once when I went to California like 3 years ago. Like I don't.
Yeah, I think it only makes sense if you have a very close ongoing relationship with the customer.
Yeah, like I got one from my dentist. Like that's good. That's something that I would want to know in case I need to make an appointment or something. But I think if it's not a super crucial business, I don't think you need to get super into detail. It's nice to kind of give an update, but only if you have like, substantial information and you don't have, like you said, just get to the point.
Yeah. How sick of COVID are you?
Sick of the
I guess it's really yes, no, but are you sick of it? So my guess is most people are going to probably say, yeah, we're over it for sure. But I wonder if they're over the messaging, positive or negative, dealing with that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you say yes or no, maybe expound about why you chose that in the comments, because I think that would be enriching not only to everybody that's watching, but like, as somebody who does the social media for 15, 20 different companies, like it's good for me to know kind of how people are feeling. I think what I've done with a lot of clients is obviously, through a few posts in how they're like kind of handling things, but trying to like think of things that they can do at home. Like, posting recipes or like things they can do with their kids or like just kind of like maybe what's live streaming that might be relevant to the company. Just kind of content or activities that they can do at home instead of like reminding them that they're at home and have to stay at home,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just giving the goods, huh?
Yeah, you want to expound about it a little bit more. And one of the things I've found with, staying relevant, of course, you want to thank health workers and stuff like that, but just kind of think of ways that you can push that messaging a little more. Like maybe you could help make masks or like, donate proceeds or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that is a little bit more meaningful in general, but also cuts through like, thanks health workers. Like, I don't know.
That's really interesting because it's so easy and so simple for someone to just say thanks healthcare workers, but taking action to actually show your gratitude in one way or another is a lot more difficult. So actually, I saw recently that Why Not Pizza was giving away meals to healthcare workers, and I shared that with the company in Slack. Very actionable, right? So I don't know if they went after the publicity with that or not. I assume that someone probably just heard about it in the paper and then published what Why Not Pizza was doing. But I think that it's a good thing to give in this situation without expecting anything in return. So what they're doing and they're taking action, I think is fantastic.
And I mean, it's a good deed, but it is, it does make the business look good. Not that that's why you're doing it, but it doesn't hurt.
Well, you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you do the right thing, it always, it usually makes you look good.
Yeah. And a term I've been thinking about a lot lately is just like, you got to put like the bark to your bite kind of thing. So, if you're going to say something on social media, do something actionable in real life about it. Make sure you're supporting your employees, supporting people. One thing I thought of is I think it's good for retail spaces to like require people to wear masks or something like that, and it shows the public that like you care about their safety and not just like get in, buy. You know what I mean?
That's a really good point too. Yeah, I mean, so this is obviously not social media messaging per se, but this is real world marketing of how your employees are marketing your business. So I shared with you guys this morning that I went to Lowe's recently, and I was kind of taken aback because actually all the employees except for just a couple were not wearing face masks. It was the same at Home Depot as well, and it's the same at Walmart when I go there. And it's, first of all, it's surprising that the companies don't make employees wear that to protect everybody. But I thought it was from a messaging standpoint, it was odd that they weren't required to wear masks. We also saw this with Vice President Pence recently. He went to the Mayo Clinic and he wasn't wearing a mask, but all the other doctors were. And whether he meant to do it or not, it conveyed a message. And in that case, it was a negative message, and he got a lot of heat for that. So, sticking with the social norms as they change is also important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and you just gotta make your customer feel like you care about not only them, but the people that are helping them at your stores. Like having it, if it like helps if the person's sick and wears a mask, but somebody that's not sick and then the sick person's not wearing a mask, it's not really going to do anything. So if everybody's wearing one, it's like a 70% like 70% transfer rate decrease or something like that. But it's definitely good PR. And I mean, you said it's not a social media thing, but it can be. You can mention like, hey, we make sure that everybody's wearing masks for your safety and we care about you.
Yeah, that's a good point. It relays the message that we're all in this together, right? Which that alone is actually another overused phrase, which I used very early on. We're going to get through this together. And I repeated it because I didn't make that up. I just repeated what I heard along the way. And then I really thought, well, how are we doing that? And that's when we started to kind of put some things into action with the company and some of these like relief plans that we have for some of our clients and new clients. And again, I think it comes like the best messaging is your actions. So Definitely. Saying it is cheap, but doing something about it is what really matters. Hey, so by the way, it looks like 100% of the responders said yes, they are sick of COVID posts.
So let's kind of dive into what, like, okay, if I can't talk about COVID, like what can I possibly talk about? Like what else are people paying attention to? And I think the only COVID post I like and I think are funny are like COVID memes. So I did schedule one on your Instagram, and I think I sent it to Sean so he could post a link so you guys can like it and stuff if you want. But it was just like a funny Scooby-Doo Zoom thing, and I think people seem to appreciate that because it kind of, if you're looking at things in a lighthearted way, like the best way to stop from crying is to laugh or whatever. We talked a little bit before this about how like TikTok's doing that really well. They've always been good about self-deprecating humor, but I think they're really taking a dark situation and like I think the funniest ones I've seen are just like the ridiculous things that people are doing with their time. Like this one dude like filled his whole room with potatoes, like just stuff like that,
Yeah. I'm not on TikTok quite as much as I used to be, but I've looked at it in the last 6 to 7 weeks, and it is funny because, like you said, it's self-deprecating, and well, that's really just kind of TikTok in general. It's just having fun, which is totally different than say like what you're seeing on LinkedIn. Right? LinkedIn is just the opposite of TikTok. LinkedIn is super serious business. It's starting to get a little softer in some regards, but people are really talking about things that are hardcore business at this point, like all the government programs and all the changes in taxes and things that matter to business people, especially like business owners and operators. But for the general public, it's just too heavy at this point.
Yeah, I think another post that did really well was one that I put on Instagram for you about the Google grants early on. I don't know, it was maybe like a few weeks ago it posted. I think people really responded to that because it was, your expert advice and you like getting that information and putting it out to the public where they might have otherwise not seen it. So I think LinkedIn's really good for that. Just like using what and kind of,
making sure that other people know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like we do a fair amount of online advertising. So yeah, we know about these grants because Facebook's emailing us directly, Google's emailing us directly. not a lot of people get that kind of communication. They may stumble across it in, the media, newspaper, whatever, but we thought it was good information to pass on that probably a lot of people didn't know about and could benefit from. So just passing along some news that's not necessarily mainstream news. I think that's important too. Like, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to pass on, as an example, the negative economic impact of coronavirus, or how many people have contracted in the United States. Like that, that's mainstream. You can get that anywhere. They don't need to hear that from you as an individual or as a business. But if it's more niche to what you do, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too. Just there's so much negative, obviously, like this is a very negative situation, but being the positive on the news feed is obviously like that's going to be, your best bet. I mean, there's there's of course there's a lot of people getting infected and dying, and it's like economic impact and whatnot, but if you focus on like maybe like the little lighthearted aspects, those seem to do pretty well with our clients.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, the recovery rate and the ratio of that, like if you do want to talk about that. But and I think you can talk about your business doing well if it is, or like your achievements during this time, but try to do it in a way that isn't too braggy. Even on my personal Instagram, I've seen people, like, especially if it's about money, like I've seen people talk about like obviously like the stimulus checks and stuff like that. It's just, I think that's a little tacky.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I feel like me have stumbled on that recently. And I want to talk about that a little bit more in a second, because I think that's a valuable lesson that we learned, and it changed our attitudes for the better recently. We've come to a realization recently about some of the overly positive and maybe overly ambitious things that we have been posting since the beginning of COVID. So once this all went down, and I still remember the date, it was March 16th, a Monday, when everything happened all at once. And me personally, it was a day of doom and gloom, and I didn't really come out of that funk for about 3 days. And I just didn't know what was going to happen. Anything could happen, and everyone had turned to the negative for sure. But once I kind of came out of that, I kind of started thinking about what we could do. And what I really wanted to do is definitely double down on our marketing. And I wanted to go on offense with posting a lot of positive things that were happening with us. And so there were a lot of positive things that were happening and have continued to happen. We have gotten some new clients. We have gotten some new recurring revenue. We've also lost some. We don't talk much about that, but we've definitely lost some and we've gained some. Overall, it's probably about the same. But what we realize is that it's really not a good idea to be super ambitious and aggressively ambitious, even in times like this. So, I think it's worthwhile to be a little bit humble and recognize that if you are doing well, then that's enough. Like, you don't need to go into detail. We're going to get through this, and we're going to make sure that our clients get through it as well, and we're going to try to get the entire community through it the best that we can help out. So any way that we can help out, we are. But I think it's important to kind of think about beyond the ones and zeros and the revenue and things like that. Like there's bigger things at stake here, and so not a lot of people want to hear about those kinds of things right now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that kind of sums it up right there, honestly.
Yeah. So what we've been doing is backing off of that a little bit, because we felt uncomfortable talking the same way during this crisis as we did before. But like one of the things that I see a lot, especially on Twitter, because that's where I kind of spend a lot of my social media time, is you'll see people pick a theme, and then they'll post about that theme all the time. And I do the same thing. So like on Twitter, it's entrepreneurialism. It's all about running a business, starting a business. But I wasn't really all that interested, especially like in the early days of COVID, like March, basically. I wasn't really that interested in talking about that anymore. Like there were different things in my mind, but I had scheduled a whole bunch of tweets to go out, and I realized that it was inauthentic. Even though those were my tweets and those were my beliefs at that moment in time, they didn't fit in. And so I realized that I didn't even want to talk about that stuff anymore, and I certainly should not just let the schedule go out like it normally does.
Yeah,
And I think that's
definitely.
an important thing as well, is like, even though like everyone who responded to the poll said that they're kind of over the COVID messaging, I personally think that you can't just ignore it at this point. You have to have a mix.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to rethink it, but I guess not the point of it, but like everybody kind of knows what's going on, so not that we can move away from it, but I think it's safe now to kind of go in a different direction. Like you can't go exactly how you were going before because nothing is the same. So keep that in mind, but you can start, I think people can really start to kind of, go back to normal a little bit, but just think about, just, just kind of rethink your strategy a little bit. Think about what your customers are doing right now. They're at home a lot, post things they can do at home, you know, just, just be smart about it. And I think,
So even though things are opening up, I think we're going to see it just kind of like steady out. And as long as it's steady, it's still going to be around. So I think people will continue to talk about it, and people will continue to be affected. And certainly from a business perspective, we're not going like from 0% yesterday to 100% tomorrow. That's not happening. We know
no,
that. So
no.
I think, what's interesting for me is backing up to March 16th, when all this went down in the United States and we went on lockdown. It was uncertainty. We didn't know what that meant. And that's where people got scared. Now we know what's about to happen, right? We know that the states are opening back up. We know that businesses are opening back up. We know that people are getting back out in the community. And so I think I think there's not as much fear there, and certainly there's not as much need to educate people on COVID. I think it's just a matter of acknowledging that we're all in this weird situation that we're temporarily in, and it'll go away. So I would say, if I had to guess, 6 months. For 6 months, not really hysteria, but more talk than you would expect.
Yeah, just not hysteria, but just the overcast of COVID on our like media and business landscape. I mean, I think that's how long it'll take for like people to go out like they were again. But I think as far as the social feeds go, I would give it maybe like a few more weeks. I'm not really sure. Like people are already fatigued with it and don't want to post about it, nor do they want to see post about it. And I think I think businesses and people personally will start to recognize that and kind of back away a little bit. And I think it is safe to back away a little bit as long as people still are just like kind of hunkering down for, at least the next few months.
Yeah.
I think that's well, I think you mentioned something about we don't need to inform people about being safe, but I don't know. We don't need to, but they should find that out somewhere because they're getting kind of wild right now with all the protests and stuff. But I don't think anything should go back to normal for a little bit. Like,
Yeah. Well, it looks like things are kind of going back to normal. Us Americans, no one's going to tell us what to do, right?
yeah,
I mean, businesses are packed. I was driving home. I went to Lowe's, drove home, and businesses were packed. I couldn't believe it. So people are out and about, and I think they're going to return to normal life pretty soon.
yeah.
But I guess based on all that, the hysteria. The question was the hysteria. Maybe the hysteria is only more like a month away, from being dead, and then it's just going to be this constant hum that's out there.
hmm
So.
Well, what do our viewers think? Are the results in?
I don't have the results yet, but we have a couple comments. So let's see here. We have Tim again. Tim says, He's been making TikToks almost every day. Good for you.
Okay,
So,
I did make like 5 TikToks yesterday, like just like
so,
stupid ones, but
for those that don't know, I'm a pretty big Gary Vee fan, and Gary Vee says if you're not making 3 or 4 TikToks every single day, you're behind. So that's a lot of TikToks, but all right, let's see. Elena says, hello, Array team. Thanks for the constant content and tips. You betcha. Thanks for tuning in. And Elena also says, well said. We're all in a weird spot, but it's easier to embrace and remind yourself this isn't a forever. Yeah, and I think that is very, very well said. We know that it's temporary, and like I said before, we can at least now foresee the future. It's we know that we're working on a vaccine. We know that things are going to be reopening. We know that normal life is kind of coming back. So we're getting there.
yeah, the poll is like pretty split. Somebody thinking between 1 month and more than 6 months. So that's a split poll. Yeah, I mean, it kind of, not to use an overused term, it's uncertain. Like it is kind of hard to tell what's going to happen. But, like Elena said, it's not forever. Like we'll get out of it eventually, but we just got to be smart about it. The smarter we are about it now, the sooner we'll be out of it later.
All right. I think, to kind of summarize what we're talking about, it's hard to get away from COVID at this point, but the COVID focus is changing. Your messaging should change with it. It's okay to inject non-COVID messaging into what you're doing. As a matter of fact, it sounds like Shannon and I are on the same page that should be your strategy, is start to blend the two things in. And, you certainly don't want to get stuck only talking about one thing and then like COVID, and then that one thing goes away, and it will go away eventually. So it's time to start blending these two things together.
Yeah, I think that was a really good point you made earlier about like focusing on COVID for so long, you forget how to do other things. So this is a good time to kind of ease back into that. And then before you know it, hopefully our feeds will be the way they used to be.